The chamber of the Galactic Council was a spectacle of power and authority, its vastness designed to dwarf all who entered. Gleaming pillars of polished obsidian rose to a ceiling adorned with the stars of conquered systems, each constellation a reminder of the Council's dominance. Rows of alien dignitaries, their forms as varied as the biomes of their homeworlds, filled the semicircular seating. The hum of whispered conversations and subtle gestures of superiority echoed throughout the hall. All eyes were fixed on the lone human standing at the center of the chamber. Ambassador Evelyn Carter stood calm and resolute, her crisp navy suit a sharp contrast to the ostentatious robes and carapaces of the alien counselors. Her presence was deliberate. Humanity had chosen her not for her experience in warfare, but for a sharp mind and unyielding composure. She met the stares of her audience without flinching, her dark eyes scanning the room as if cataloging every sneer, every dismissive smirk. The presiding figure of the council, High Arbitrator Threx, loomed above her on a dais. His elongated frame shimmered with a translucent exoskeleton that refracted the chamber's golden light, giving him an almost angelic aura. His voice, amplified by unseen technology, was sharp and cold, cutting through the air like a blade. "Ambassador Carter," he began, his tone laced with condescension, "we summoned you here not for negotiation, but to deliver humanity's final chance for compliance. The Galactic Council has been patient, far more than your primitive species deserves." He gestured with a spindly arm, and a holographic display materialized above the dais. It depicted Earth surrounded by symbols of the Council's authority, chains encircling the planet, a visual metaphor for subjugation. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber as the projection expanded to show Earth's militaries, cities, and resources being cataloged as spoils. "The terms are simple," Threx continued. "You will surrender all rights to your planetary resources and disband your pitiful armed forces. Earth will be integrated as a vassal state, contributing to the glory of the Galactic Council." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Failure to comply will result in consequences your kind cannot imagine. Our fleets already orbit your colonies. Your species has no future outside of our mercy." The chamber erupted in agreement. Alien voices spoke in dozens of languages, their tones unified in scorn. Evelyn remained silent, her expression unreadable. She waited, allowing the chaos to peak before raising a hand. Her calm gesture stood in stark contrast to the hostility around her, and the room quieted, if only out of curiosity. "High Arbitrator Threx," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I acknowledge the authority of this council and the enormity of its power. But before humanity responds to your ultimatum, I must ask, have you studied us?" Threx tilted his head, a ripple of confusion passing through his translucent features. "Studied you? Your species? We have no need to examine prey." "Then you don't understand what you're dealing with," Evelyn said, her voice sharp now, her words carrying the weight of centuries of struggle. "We are not prey. We are survivors." The counselors murmured, but Evelyn pressed on. "You stand here, issuing demands with arrogance born from power. You call us primitive, yet you haven't studied what makes us unique. You see our lack of advanced technology and assume weakness. But tell me, High Arbitrator, have you studied humanity's wars?" Threx sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Wars? You mean your squabbles on that speck of dirt you call a planet?" "Yes," Evelyn said firmly, stepping closer to the dais. Her voice rose, cutting through the air with the precision of a blade. "Study our wars, and you'll see a history of resilience unmatched in this galaxy. You'll find stories of civilizations that faced extinction only to rise stronger. You'll find a species that turns desperation into innovation and chaos into strategy. And you'll find a people who fight not for conquest, but for survival. Tell me, High Arbitrator, are you prepared to face such a species in war? The chamber fell silent, the echoes of her words hanging in the air. Even Threx hesitated, his sneer faltering as unease rippled through the assembly. Evelyn let the silence stretch, her gaze sweeping over the gathered counselors. "We came here willing to negotiate," she continued, her voice now softer but no less commanding. "But if you choose war, you'll not only learn what humanity is capable of, you'll regret ever forcing us to show you." The tension in the room was palpable. For the first time, the Galactic Council, rulers of countless worlds, faced a challenge they could not easily dismiss. And as Evelyn Carter stood before them, unwavering and unbroken, the first seeds of doubt began to sprout in their minds. Evelyn Carter's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken challenges. The alien dignitaries shifted uneasily in their seats, their bravado dimmed. She took a step forward, her eyes scanning the room, and began to recount the brutal history of her people, a history not of submission, but of relentless survival. "You mock us for being primitive," she said, her voice steady but laced with quiet defiance. "You see Earth's scars and think them signs of weakness. But those scars tell stories of wars fought not for glory, but for existence itself. Let me teach you what you've chosen to ignore." A wave of tension rippled through the chamber, silencing even the most skeptical counselors. Evelyn's tone sharpened as she painted a picture of humanity's past. "The age of chaos. Long before we reached for the stars," she began, "we waged wars on our own soil, in the confines of a single world. The industrial age brought devastation like we'd never seen before. Trenches stretching for miles, filled with soldiers who faced death in its most harrowing forms. Our ingenuity turned every advance into a weapon. Machine guns, poison gas, and artillery that reshaped the land itself." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the council. "Those wars didn't just teach us how to kill. They taught us how to endure. When technology outpaced strategy, we adapted. When resources dwindled, we innovated. We were forged in the crucible of desperation, emerging stronger each time." A few counselors exchanged nervous glances, their confidence beginning to erode. Evelyn pressed on, her voice growing firmer. "The wars of the modern era. By the mid-20th century, our conflicts reached a new level of destruction," she continued. "World War II was a global catastrophe, fought across continents and oceans. It was in this era that we unlocked the atom's power, not as a gift, but as a weapon. The atomic bomb ended the war, but left a scar on our collective soul. We learned the price of victory and the cost of unchecked ambition." Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropping slightly. "And yet, even in the shadow of nuclear annihilation, we didn't stop. The Cold War followed, a standoff between two superpowers armed to the teeth, each capable of obliterating the other. It wasn't brute force that kept the peace. It was strategy, patience, and the understanding that survival often means walking the knife's edge of destruction." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber as the counselors absorbed her words. Evelyn's voice grew softer, almost contemplative. "The wars beyond Earth, when humanity reached the stars," she said, her tone shifting to one of grim determination. "We thought we'd left those wars behind. But conflict followed us, as it always does. Our first encounters with alien species were not diplomatic. They were violent. In the depths of space, we faced enemies with technology centuries ahead of ours. Yet, time and again, we prevailed. Do you know why?" She let the question hang in the air, daring the council to answer. "When none did," she continued, "because humanity doesn't fight wars the way others do. We don't rely on superior technology or overwhelming numbers. We fight with ingenuity. We turn mining lasers into tactical weapons. We used terrain that was hostile even to us as an advantage. We lured enemies into traps, forcing them to fight on our terms. Evelyn's voice rose, her passion evident. We are the species that turn desperation into an art form. When you corner us, we don't surrender. We adapt, innovate, and strike back harder than anyone expects. The chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of the holographic displays above. Evelyn let the quiet stretch, her words sinking deep into the minds of her audience. The counselors who had once dismissed her as a representative of a backwater species now looked at her with something closer to apprehension. "We didn't ask for these wars," Evelyn said finally, her voice calm but unyielding. "But we learned from them. We became stronger because of them. You think we fear your fleets and your weapons? No. We've faced annihilation before, and we survived. If you choose to fight us, you'll learn this lesson the hard way." High Arbitrator Threx leaned forward, his elongated features betraying a hint of unease. "These tales of yours are impressive, Ambassador. But surely you don't mean to imply that your primitive history could match the might of the Galactic Council." Evelyn met his gaze with steely resolve. "History isn't just a collection of stories, High Arbitrator. It's a warning. And if you've studied our wars, you know one thing above all. Pushing humanity to fight is a mistake you won't survive." Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud on the brink of breaking. The counselors shifted uncomfortably, their confidence shaken. Evelyn took a step back, her expression unreadable but her point unmistakable. The High Arbitrator's sneer faltered, and for the first time, the Galactic Council seemed to understand the enormity of what they were provoking. Evelyn's lesson was far from over, but her audience had already begun to grasp its weight. A heavy silence blanketed the chamber. The Galactic Council, once so self-assured in its authority, now sat in uneasy contemplation. Evelyn Carter stood unyielding at the center of the vast room, her presence a quiet but undeniable challenge. High Arbitrator Threx broke the silence first, his voice less certain than before. "Ambassador Carter, your words are compelling, but this council governs over thousands of species, many of whom once thought themselves indomitable. We have seen defiance before and crushed it beneath the weight of our fleets." Evelyn's expression didn't waver. "And how many of those species were like us?" she asked, her tone even but cutting. Threx's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Your arrogance will be your undoing. This council does not act out of malice, Ambassador. Integration into our order is for the greater good of all. Resistance only delays the inevitable and increases the suffering of your people." The murmurs of agreement that followed were weaker than before. Some counselors shifted uneasily in their seats, their earlier certainty shaken by Evelyn's account of humanity's resilience. She seized the moment, her voice ringing with the weight of generations. "You speak of inevitability," she said, stepping closer to the dais. "But let me tell you what is inevitable when humanity is pushed to the brink. We do not break. We do not surrender. We fight. And when we fight, we learn. Every loss becomes a lesson, every mistake a stepping stone to something greater. Can you say the same for your empire?" A nervous silence settled over the counselors. Evelyn's gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of those who dared to look back. "We do not seek war," she continued, her voice steady. "But if you force it upon us, you will face a species that has thrived in the face of extinction, that has turned survival into an art form. Your fleets may burn our cities. Your armies may occupy our lands, but you will never break us. And when the tide turns, and it always does, you will wish you had chosen peace." High Arbitrator Threx's translucent form shimmered with barely restrained anger. "You think you can frighten us with words, Ambassador? The Galactic Council has ruled unopposed for millennia. Your defiance is a brief flicker in the vast timeline of our dominance. We will snuff it out as we have countless others." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Millennia of dominance, she repeated softly, her tone almost contemplative. It must be comforting to believe in the permanence of your power. But history has a way of humbling even the greatest empires. I wonder how many of those you've crushed were united, as humanity will be if you strike. How many fought not for conquest, but for their very existence. Threx opened his mouth to respond, but Evelyn raised a hand, cutting him off. Her voice grew sharper, each word deliberate and cutting. Make no mistake, High Arbitrator. The day you declare war on humanity will be the day your council learns what true desperation looks like. We will fight with weapons you've never seen, tactics you can't predict, and a resolve you cannot comprehend. And when the dust settles, the Galactic Council will be remembered not as rulers, but as a cautionary tale. A low murmur spread through the chamber, some counselors glancing nervously at one another. Threx's composure cracked, his shimmering form flaring with frustration. Enough, he barked, slamming a clawed hand onto the dais. This council will not be cowed by the bravado of a primitive species. Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deliberate step back, her eyes steady. Then make your decision, she said calmly. Issue your ultimatum. But know this, humanity has already made its choice. We will not bow. We will not break. If you force us to fight, we will ensure that the galaxy remembers this day, not as the day humanity fell, but as the day the Galactic Council's arrogance brought about its own undoing. The chamber fell silent once more, the weight of her words sinking deep. Threx's mandibles clicked furiously, but he did not respond. One by one, the counselors averted their gazes, the once unified chamber now fractured by doubt. Evelyn Carter turned and began to walk away, her every step measured and confident. At the chamber's entrance, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. Study our wars, High Arbitrator, she said, her voice carrying through the vast room. If you do, you'll understand why this council's survival depends on choosing peace. Without waiting for a response, she exited the chamber, leaving behind a room filled with unease and uncertainty. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council had been silenced, not by threats, but by the undeniable truth of humanity's resilience. And deep in the hearts of its rulers, a seed of fear began to grow.